Good morning. The Dean, Dr. Reddy, HODs, Dr. Thomas, the guests. Can you hear me now? Yeah? Yeah, okay. And my dear students, good morning. I'm delighted to be here at Christ today. I came in last evening and the joy, the lightness to be in a university, to be at Christ was immense. So thank you so much, Asita, for having made this possible. Today I'm going to speak to you about data and the art of storytelling. And since I work in government and I've been doing so since the last 36 years, what I'll try and do is to make a case for why stories matter in governance. So let me begin with the story. Post-partition, we were faced with the problem of settling those who had taken refuge in India. A quick calculation showed that we would need around 2.7 million hectares of land to settle the refugees, while only 1.9 million hectares had been left behind on this side of the border. Sardar Tarlok Singh of the Indian Civil Service was given this task in March 1948. He, of course, needed data of two kinds. One, on the value of land for which a measure of a standard acre was chosen, which is the area that can yield a specified quantity of rice, and the graded cut to be applied for eligibility, that is, each household would get a specified fraction of land they claimed they had left behind in Pakistan. But how do you verify such claims? So he arranged public assemblies of refugees from the same village, and within 18 months settled 2.5 lakh applications. You can compare it with the time we take now with far more technology. You can see for yourself how the story exemplifies problem solving in government. You need to know what you want to measure. Ask yourself what's your intention behind it before you begin to look for data. The data should be reliable, relevant, and verifiable. There must be a validation process, the assemblies in this case, which must be effective. The best processes I have seen are often the simplest and transparent. Let sunlight do the sanitation, as it were. They facilitate sharing of data, which is not one-way, but two-way, placing high reliance on the channel to receive feedback from the people. Most important is that the data that is to be collected, the purpose for which it is to be used, must keep the people of the country at the center of its beating heart. That lays the foundation for public trust, which is the fount of justice and dignity in life, the very purpose of governance. You all have heard Gandhi's talisman. To this day, it gives me goosebumps. It gives me now. This is what Gandhi says, and I quote, "I will give you a talisman. When you're in doubt or when the self becomes too much with you, apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man whom you have seen, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him. Will he gain anything by it? Will it restore to him control over his own life and destiny? In other words, will it lead to Swaraj, that is freedom, for the hungry and spiritually starving millions? Then you'll find your doubts and yourself melt away. My dear students, at this moment of history, when data is the new oil, we need Gandhi's talisman as never before. When Gandhi spoke of spiritual starvation, I believe he was talking about life without dignity or hope. The struggle before the nascent nation was not only external. We woke to freedom, not just from the colonialists, but from our society's own leaden weight of casteism, child marriage, and so on. The task set out in the Constitution was to sustain this dream of complete and meaningful freedom. Governance, after all, is too important to be left to just government, and people need information, data, to keep the fire of that dream burning. to scorch the ideals into our psyche, and so that they power every action, every stance of the nation. But for that vital stream of information, the markers of democracy, why even the Constitution gets reduced to mere symbolism. Much of the government work is on public welfare, to remove the barriers to education and health without which dignity is not attainable. The girl child must attend school. It isn't enough that the Dalits aren't turned away at the gates to the school, but they must be nurtured inside with care to their unique needs. The changes that we seek are therefore behavioral and need to be backed by powerful communication. Take Swachh Bharat mission, for example. I will invoke Gandhi once again. Cleanliness that begins at your home, the villages and the cities, the roads, our rivers, our forests, our country. Behavioral changes don't happen with diktats, but with impactful stories powered by data. 38.4% of our children under 5 are stunted. Open defecation that seeps into drinking water damages the gut health that prevents absorption of food, besides causing infections, diarrhea, which is a big killer. 19% of these kids belong to communities that practice open defecation. How can the mission work if we blind ourselves to the manual scavengers or the sanitation workers? A compelling story will weave in the dangers of women defecating in the cornfields. How we define our goals, whom we target, how and whom we fund, and most important, how we communicate this intent and how we tell the story matters, for which the story needs to be powered by facts and data to capture public imagination, lift the scheme above its mere optics of leaders sweeping the roads, to a powerful transformation touching upon our health, the survival of our children, the safety of our women, and granting dignity to the lives of those who have scavenged it for centuries. Thus, we can hope for a public buy-in and meaning participation in the scheme. Data, in some ways, is like love, magic, wonder, which opens the gates to the richness of human life. Data, too, is a key. It is not for nothing that data flits into our life through a portal. I was once posted in Rome, and my son and I would often walk to Aventino, which has what they call the Aventine keyhole. You peer through the keyhole, and you can see the St. Peter's Basilica framed around its round rim. But to fully experience the Basilica, you must visit, and only then will you get to see for yourself its true span, its history, its story. I'm a public auditor, and it is my job to use the data as a keyhole, as a tool, and not make the mistake of elevating it to the Basilica itself. Following the same example of Swachh Bharat, success in the mission cannot be captured only by the number of toilets constructed or their geographical distribution. You need to go to the site to see how many are functional. 1.4 lakh toilets were constructed in government schools as a part of the Right to Education project, but almost 40% of those surveyed by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, of which I am part, were found to be non-existent, partially constructed or unused. Why? Because 70% did not have running water and 75% got choked due to poor maintenance. You can drill further the data on how many of these toilets were integrated to sewerage, and is the capacity adequate, what happens to the untreated sewage, and so on and so forth. Now, those of you who have read the CAG's audit reports might bemoan their size, the surfeit of information, often written in turgid language. Early in my career, I drafted paragraphs, and I actually written this, of the 1,246.87 crore subsidy released, rupees 421.55 remained unutilized as of 31st March 2002. I've lost you already, right? Now we might say it in a graphic, shaded in red after the 66% mark. It isn't communication if the message is hidden in a labyrinth of facts and figures. To that extent, design is not a decoration. It underpins the grammar of democracy. We've seen many notable experiments in our country. For instance, a social audit report on a public construction being discussed in a Gram Sabha in Rajasthan. The report lists the materials used in construction, saying 20 camel loads of bricks, not cubic meters. Camel loads, which people can understand and then engage to demand accountability. My organization, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, is 164 years old. One of its historical records is what is called an Introduction to Indian Government Accounts, written in 1917 by L.E. Pritchard, Accountant General of Burma. Para 47 of the document relates to keeping of muster rolls. That's the original record which, for the labor that is engaged in the work, with their names and the basis of which the money is released, their wages are paid. Pritchard says, and I quote, "The muster roll represents the point of contact between the concrete facts in the paper accounts, which is data, or between the payments and their equivalents. It is here," Pritchard says, "that the accounts may be said to obtain their original vitality and reality. Their accordance with facts through all their subsequent changes of forms depends on truth at this point. That, in a nutshell, is the job of the public auditor, to audit the claims by placing herself on site and check with the original records the ground reality, so that the data obtains its original vitality and reality, since all subsequent change of forms depends on truth at that point. Those humble, musty papers with that dry data is actually the point of original vitality and truth." In the age of digital narratives, truth doesn't vanish, it gets dressed up, sometimes in a tailored tuxedo of statistics, or sometimes in strict jeans of a trending hashtag. It can be cherry-picked, airbrushed, or rid of context. The danger isn't always in outright lies. It is when reality is carefully edited, when the inconvenient data points are quickly sent backstage and the spotlight falls on what the storyteller wants to tell. Digital narratives could then be like curated museum tours. You're shown the beautiful artifacts, you're told a version of history, but you're rarely invited to explore the locked rooms. To fully experience love, you must fall deeply in love. Raw data, like love or wonder, begets meaningful data when you dive deep. Data must empower the people vis-a-vis the state, turn the tables, as it were. For that, open government data must meet the requirements of the 3 laws, which I think you know, but I will repeat. If it can't be spidered or indexed, it doesn't exist, which is to say that it must be discoverable. If it isn't available in open and machine-readable format, it can't engage, so it must be usable. If it is if a legal framework doesn't allow it to be repurposed, it doesn't empower, it must be shareable. All aspects of data, the manner of collection, the dissemination, the form in which it is shared, access, storage, need to put people in the center of the architecture of that data. When we took over presidency of the G20, I was a part of it actually. The India story we showcased was the success of Aadhaar and of UPI. In June 2025, the UPI processed 18.39 billion transfers worth 24 lakh crore. A billion Aadhaar enrollments, 1,200 schemes that now run on direct benefit transfer, and transferred 6.83 lakh crore in 2024. These are staggering numbers. We are a decade into this transition of welfare to a technocratic calculus. It has helped clean up the data. The government says that it has saved $40 billion by weeding out ineligible beneficiaries in the last 8 years. Enough time has elapsed for the system to demonstrate its successes. The system has stabilized to grant a pause for reflection. In the past, there were layers of democratic mediation through the MP, the MLA, the Panchayat, the BDO. Have those layers got replaced by layers of impregnable technology? The cash in hand could get attributed to an authority far removed to a cloud or in a capital city, thus invisibilizing the people's representative closest to the ground. The question to then ask is, has this technocratic shift to welfare extracted a cost in democratic mediation or political accountability? If it has, as Anmol Ratan Singh of the Punch Foundation argued, recast a right-bearing citizen to an auditable beneficiary. Or as he says, if the digitization hasn't ended up curating who is visible, who can complain, and whose suffering is computable. Recent research on the efficacy of cash transfers under 2 schemes in Andhra Pradesh is revealing. Both the schemes, Raitu Bharosa and Jagananna Amma Vodi, target marginalized tribal communities. The good news first, those who got the cash used it to offset their losses in agriculture, cover health needs, purchase materials for their children's education. But 24% of the eligible did not receive any benefit under the Raitu Bharosa scheme. The exclusion is 15% of the second scheme. In fact, those who didn't get the benefits were the ones who were worse off. They were the families with no access to education and had no toilets. They lost out because of technical glitches. A beneficiary found that his Aadhaar had been suspended or the Aadhaar wasn't linked to the NPCI mapper, despite many visits. State officials were struggling with layers of technology and unable to find the solution at their level. These numbers, 24%, 15%, do they mean anything to you? Do they engage you? The answer is perhaps a no. But if I now were to now show you a photograph of a woman whose only source of income was the old age pension and was declared a ghost beneficiary and is now on the streets. Let's not call her an old woman, let's take her name, Dakubai. Let's ask her how she came to be declared a ghost 6 months ago. Let's name the village, Kushalpura, Rajsamand. Is it raining there or is it hot? How did she survive these 6 months? Will 6 months now look like mere 6 months or 6 months? Let her tell us of each of her 5 visits, a specific number, not airbrushed as many visits, 5 visits to the block office, and how on the 5th visit they told her that this can only be rectified at Jaipur. They will need to cancel her existing pension payment order and now she will have to apply afresh. How will that count of 24% or 15% look to us now? Will even one such person matter to us? Now, if you thought this was a class in fiction writing, it is not. Let me play you a 2-minute video. Can I request Sonu? This is from MKSS. Nikhil Day has collected this.
एक वार्ड का नंबर राजो फार्म भरा जो तो लेने मोटर पूछो तो मोटर ने सिरिंज लगाया मोटर तो मैंने लगे रात नन वो भोजन चलो गणी मगजी झाड़ा टटे जाऊं जानू नहीं आवे कोई आदिवासी को नहीं करो हां हां पहले नहीं जा कंप्यूटर मीडिया वाले मशीन में नहीं जा क्या आधार कार्ड है ना आधार कार्ड है कोई नहीं यूज आधार कार्ड है અને वहाँ कह दो खातो खल्ला है तो तनका भी मिले अच्छा અને वो भी मिले ये तो थया कंट्रोल में क्या अंगूठो लगायो तो को पहला देख ये जट मंडाया एडमिशन ऐसा मटकी पा हां एक भी मिट गई हां बस हमारा पाता पड़े फजा पड़ गया है सब पड़ गया कोई कसर को नहीं हाँ
Thank you. So data is an enabler. The problem is the surfeit of indifference. When people get reduced to mere entries in a data set, when a grievance can be flattened into a ticket number in a centralized MIS, the only way out of this morass is stories. We still have people who tell stories on behalf of the disempowered. But now, let's invite the people to tell their own stories. If the benefit is direct, let's ask the intermediaries to step aside and hear from those involved directly. Those who receive or don't receive services, and those on the ground who deliver the services from both. Let's hear what was done right and what wasn't. Let's hear both. Let the data take us to the people so that it can truly act as a portal. For that is the essence of democracy, where everyone has the right to tell her story and demand that she be heard. Thank you.